the deal that we do have on the table, the spending cuts that have been agreed to by both parties, do you think that those cuts are deep enough that they hurt economic growth, or is this plan better than you expected it would be because the cuts, at least in the near term, looking forward to next year, are relatively small?
The whole process, so not just the deal, but the many months of squabbles in D.C. and dysfunctionality have made the outlook worse. So it's not just the deal, it's the whole process. And let me explain why. A debt burden is a function of the numerator, which is your debt stock, your maturity profile, your interest rates, and the denominator, which is the ability to cope with all that through incremental growth. And what we've done in this whole process is we've actually made no dent that's meaningful to the numerator, and we've worsened the denominator. So American society today is worse off after this whole debt ceiling debacle than it would have been otherwise. Not only has this been a self-inflicted wound that we manufactured out of the blue, but in addition, it makes it much more difficult to achieve what the people looking for fiscal reforms are trying to do, which is medium-term sustainability.
Those are very strong words, a self-inflicted wound manufactured out of the blue. Are you saying that this country did not have a debt crisis on its hands, that this debate, this debt ceiling debate, did not need to happen whatsoever, that this was just pure politicking that has put us in a worse economic situation?
So we created an artificial deadline. Let me explain. I think most people would agree we're not Greece, we're not Portugal, we don't have an immediate issue. Our creditors are willing to lend to us, interest rates are historically low, and importantly, our maturity profile stretches out quite well. So we have a medium-term fiscal issue that requires a coherent response. Along comes the debt ceiling. Now remember, the debt ceiling is very arcane. Every year, the Congress gets to vote on the budget. So it gets to approve, or in this case, it hasn't approved. We have continuing resolutions, but it gets a say on the budget. The U.S. is one of two countries that, in addition, has another element, which is the debt ceiling. So what the debt ceiling did, because of the politics, not the economics, but because of the politics of Washington, is it brought forward all these medium-term issues, tried to squeeze them into a very short-term period, and with the lack of leadership out of Washington, D.C., we had a total debacle, a debacle that hit confidence, and a debacle that has undermined not only our growth outlook, but also our standing in the global economy.
You're saying that we created this artificial deadline, that the debt ceiling did not have to become the massive debate that it has become. Do you also then believe, Mohamed, that we do not need tax reform right now? Because there are many that say, I mean, you can't have a long-term fix if you just look at the numbers without some sort of tax reform and more revenue in some form or another.
You're absolutely right. The math is very clear on this. It is virtually impossible to attain medium-term fiscal viability without both spending and tax reforms. You just cannot do it on the spending side, nor should you want to do it on the spending side. Okay? You should want to do it on both spending and taxes. And we're going to have an intelligent debate about a balanced approach. We simply can't force spending to carry all the burden, because there isn't enough spending to cut without really creating damage to this economy.
So when we look at tax reform, what is the magic mix? Do you lower rates enough to just become revenue neutral? So let's say you cut $1 trillion from loopholes and you cut $1 trillion when you look at rates, or do you cut rates but not so much so that you still have a bit more revenue? What's the mix that you think we need?
So if we were in a perfect world, or what economists call the first best, you would simply expand the tax net through reforms, through loophole eliminations. In fact, these loopholes are harmful, okay? You would extend the net, and you could end up with a revenue neutral process by also reducing some of the tax rates. Unfortunately, if you look at the math, we're not in that first best world. We'd like to be, but the reality is we're not. We're in a different world. We're in a world in which we're going to have to do three things. First, we're going to have to expand the net. Secondly, we're going to have to reduce some tax rates that are economically inefficient, that in fact inhibit growth. And thirdly, there are some people, including people like me, that are going to have to be taxed more. And unless we do all three, we're not going to have enough of a tax reform effort that can be combined with a spending reform effort to result in medium-term fiscal viability.